October 14, 1944. A Nissan hut at the Foggia airfield complex, Italy. The air is thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke, damp wool, and dread. Outside, a persistent autumn rain turns the airfield into a sea of mud. Inside, under the weak glow of bare bulbs, the men of the 483rd Bombardment Group huddle on wooden benches. They are bomber cruise pilots, navigators, gunners, young men with old eyes, accustomed to the grim mathematics of aerial warfare. But the briefing this morning feels different. The usual nervous chatter is replaced by a low, uneasy murmur. At the front of the room, standing before a covered map, is Captain John Riley. At 26, Riley has the lean, weathered look of a man who has spent too many hours above 20,000 feet. He doesn't have the easy charisma of a squadron leader. There is a quiet, intense focus about him, a quality that makes some men trust him implicitly and others eye him with suspicion. Today, the suspicion is winning. His own crew, 10 men assigned to the B-17G he christened St. Elmo's Fire, sit in the front row. They watch him, not the map, trying to read the verdict of their own survival in his expression. Colonel Davies finishes the preamble, his voice a tired drone listing off weather reports and diversionary airfields. Then he gestures to Riley. Captain Riley will now brief you on the primary objective. This is unconventional. Riley steps forward and pulls the sheet from the map. A collective hiss of breath fills the room. It shows a deep, winding gorge carved through the Apennine Mountains. Red circles mark not one, but 7 distinct targets, a series of rail and road bridges, packed tightly into a 15-mile stretch of the Valerio Pass. This is a critical artery feeding the German Gothic Line, a lifeline for panzers, ammunition, and men. It is also one of the most heavily defended corridors in Italy. Gentlemen, Riley begins, his voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil he feels. For 3 weeks, we've thrown everything we have at the Valerio Pass from high altitude. We've lost 17 bombers. In return, we have cratered several hillsides and, according to post-flight reconnaissance, badly frightened a herd of goats. A few weak chuckles ripple through the room. The constant cloud cover and the narrowness of the targets make high-level bombing ineffective. The Germans know this. They have their 88s positioned on the ridges, a perfect field of fire for anything coming in above 10,000 feet. So we're not going to do that. He picks up a wooden pointer, but instead of indicating a point high above the map, he traces a line deep inside the canyon itself. We're going in at valley level. Altitude, 500 feet. We'll use the terrain to mask our approach from the heavy flak batteries on the peaks. The murmuring stops. There is only stunned silence. A B-17 Flying Fortress, a 4-engine heavy bomber designed to fight in formations at 5 miles high, flying nap of the earth like a fighter bomber? It is heresy. A veteran pilot in the back, Captain McKnight, speaks up, his voice laced with disbelief. You're taking a fortress down into a canyon? At 500 feet? That's not a mission, Riley. That's a funeral procession. Riley meets his gaze. It's a mission, Mac. Their heavy guns can't depress far enough or fast enough to track us if we're below them. They'll be firing at the opposite canyon wall. And the light flak, another pilot calls out. The 20 mils and 37s they've got guarding every single bridge. They won't be on the ridges. They'll be right there, waiting for you. We'll suppress them, Riley says calmly. Every gun on my ship will be firing from the moment we enter the pass. We'll be a 10-ton gunship. We fly straight and level, one pass. Bombardier puts the bombs squarely on the pylons. We fly fast, we hit hard, and we get out. The room erupts. It's a flying coffin, someone shouts. A big, slow target flying straight into their guns. The phrase hangs in the air, a death sentence. Riley's co-pilot, Lieutenant Dave Miller, shifts uncomfortably. He looks at his crewmates, Russo, the navigator, gripping a map case so tightly his knuckles are white, Kowalski, the bombardier, staring blankly at the map, his face pale. They had discussed the theory with Riley, but hearing it laid bare in this hostile room makes it feel insane. Colonel Davies steps forward, raising a hand for silence. This is a volunteer mission. Captain Riley and his crew have accepted it. They believe it can be done. The unspoken half of the sentence is clear, no one else does. Davies looks directly at Riley's crew. Your final chance to back out, men. No shame in it. 10 pairs of eyes turn to their captain. Riley doesn't speak. He just watches them, his gaze asking a single, silent question. Sergeant Stan Pops Grabowski, the flight engineer and top turret gunner, a man twice the age of most of them, breaks the silence. He cracks a slight, grim smile. Hell, Captain. I haven't seen the ground that close since basic training. Might be a nice view. One by one, the others nod. A quiet affirmation. They are with him. To the end. The mockery from the other crews fades into a dull background noise. Their world has shrunk to the 10 men who will climb into St. Elmo's fire. As the briefing dismisses, the other crews file out, shaking their heads, some clapping a sympathetic hand on the shoulders of Riley's gunners. It feels like a wake. McKnight stops beside Riley. You're a damn fool, Jack. But I hope you prove us all wrong. Riley nods, a knot tightening in his stomach. Me too, Mac. Me too. He turns to his crew. All right. Let's go fly this coffin. The 4 Wright Cyclone R1820 engines of St. Elmo's fire roar to life in the pre-dawn gloom, each one coughing a plume of blue-white smoke into the damp Italian air. The sound is a physical force, a deep, chest-rattling vibration that works its way through the bomber's aluminum skin and into the bones of the 10 men inside. For them, it is the sound of purpose, the sound of home, the sound of the abyss. As Captain Riley eases the throttles forward, the 30-ton bomber begins its lumbering journey down the pierced steel planking runway, heavy with a full load of fuel and 10 500-pound general-purpose bombs. Inside the cockpit, Riley and his co-pilot, Dave Miller, work in practiced silence. Their movements are economical, precise, a ballet of flipping switches and checking gauges. The plane feels sluggish, weighed down. Every control input is a suggestion, not a command. Miller glances at Riley. She feels heavy today, Jack. She knows where we're going, Riley replies, his eyes fixed on the end of the runway. He pulls back on the yoke, and with a groan of stressed metal and straining engines, St. Elmo's fire lifts into the air. The muddy fields of Foggia fall away below. They climb, circling the base once before turning northeast, ascending into the cold, thin sanctuary of high altitude. For the next hour, the mission feels deceptively routine. You could almost believe it's a milk run. Up in the nose cone, Lieutenant Frank Russo, the navigator, meticulously plots their course across the Adriatic Sea. Behind him, in the plexiglass bubble, Sergeant Mike Kowalski, the bombardier, runs through a final check of the bomb release mechanism, though he knows the precise, delicate Norden bomb sight will be useless today. His work will be done by eye, by instinct, by the grace of God. Throughout the fuselage, the gunners prepare their stations. They clean the breeches of their .50 caliber Browning M2S, the scent of gun oil sharp and familiar. They scan the empty sky, a vast, indifferent canvas of blue. The intercom crackles with sporadic checks. Tail to pilot, all clear back here. Waist to pilot, looking good. These small rituals are the bedrock of their sanity, the familiar routine that holds the terror at bay. The temperature inside the unheated fuselage plummets. Frost begins to form on the metal, and the men can see their breath. It is a sterile, lifeless cold, a stark contrast to the fiery chaos they are flying toward. As they cross the Italian coast north of Ancona, Russo's voice comes over the intercom, calm and professional. Pilot from navigator. We are approaching the initial point. 10 minutes to descent. A switch is flipped in Riley's mind. The routine is over. He keys the mic. All right, boys, listen up. This is it. Gunners, test your weapons. Everyone on high alert. We're going down. A series of short, deafening bursts erupts from the turrets and waist guns, sending streams of tracers arcing into the empty air. The plane shudders with the recoil. It's a sound of defiance. We are here. We are armed. We are ready. Riley pushes the yoke forward. The nose of the B-17 dips, and the fortress begins a long, steady descent. The altimeter unwinds. 20,000 feet. 15,000. The air warms. The engines, no longer straining against the thin atmosphere, sound smoother, more powerful. The world outside transforms from an abstract map of greens and browns into a landscape of sharp, terrifying detail. Mountains rise up to meet them, their peaks wreathed in stubborn clouds. 5,000 feet, Miller calls out, his voice a little tighter now. They are below the highest peaks. The sky is no longer a vast expanse but a narrow channel between walls of stone. They have surrendered their greatest advantage, altitude. Navigator to pilot, Russo says, his face pressed against the glass. The mouth of the valley is 2 miles ahead. Course 2-9-5. Riley's knuckles are white on the controls. The air is getting choppy, the wind swirling unpredictably between the mountains. The bomber, built for the stability of the stratosphere, bucks and sways. This is what the naysayers warned about. A heavy bomber has no business being here. Bombardier to pilot, Kowalski's voice crackles. I see it. I see the entrance. Ahead, a dark fissure splits the mountainside, the opening of the Valerio Pass. It looks like a jagged wound in the earth, a gateway to a place from which there is no escape. The plan was to be shielded by the terrain, but down here, you realize the terrain is not a shield. It is a cage. You are trapped between the rock and the enemy. Riley takes a deep breath, the air tasting of oil and electricity. All crew, final check. Lock and load. We're going in. He banks the heavy bomber, lining it up with the entrance to the pass. The wings, with their 103-foot span, seem impossibly wide, a hair's breadth from the stony cliffs on either side. The sunlight vanishes, plunging them into shadow. They are committed. The engines echo off the canyon walls, announcing their arrival to every German gun crew for miles. And then, a flicker of movement on a ledge ahead. A glint of metal. Contact, the top turret gunner yells. Flak, 10 o'clock, on the cliffside. Before he can finish, the air around them tears itself apart. The world explodes. Not in a single, thunderous blast, but in 1,000 furious, metallic cracks. The first German 20mm battery opens up, and suddenly the air is no longer empty. It is a solid wall of red and white tracer rounds, a torrent of incandescent steel reaching for them. The shells don't just whistle past, they make a sound like a supernatural tearing of fabric, a sharp, violent rip in the texture of reality. Open fire. All guns, open fire. Riley's command is almost lost in the deafening roar. St. Elmo's fire erupts in a cacophony of its own. The twin .50s in the nose, the top turret, the ball turret, the waist guns, the tail, all of them unleash a storm of .50 caliber slugs. The bomber ceases to be a transport for bombs, it becomes a battleship, every porthole spitting fire. The smell of cordite floods the fuselage, acrid and intoxicating. Spent casings, hot to the touch, clatter across the floor in a brass waterfall. Thump crack. A 20mm shell hits the right wing, punching a hole the size of a fist through the aluminum skin. The plane shudders violently. Right wing hit. No fire. Miller yells, his eyes scanning the engine instruments. The gauges hold steady. The fortress absorbs the blow, groans, and flies on. They are flying at 400 feet, the canyon floor a green-brown blur just below them. The speed feels immense, terrifying. Trees and rocks flash past the windows in a dizzying streak. Up ahead, nestled in a curve of the river, is the first target, the Ponte Ferro rail bridge. It leaps into view, a skeletal steel trestle, far sooner than they'd expected. Target sighted. Kowalski screams over the intercom. Doors open. The hydraulic whine of the bomb bay doors is a high-pitched shriek beneath the thunder of the guns. A blast of cold, turbulent air rips through the plane. Kowalski isn't using the bomb sight. He is on his belly, his eye pressed to the simple drift meter, his hands on the manual release toggle. This is bombing by gut feeling. Steady, Jack, for the love of God, steady, he pleads. Riley focuses every ounce of his being on keeping the wings level, fighting the violent crosswinds. The bridge rushes toward them. Flak is coming from gun pits on both sides of it, so close you can see the muzzle flashes, see the frantic motion of the German crews. Tracers converge on the nose of the bomber. Plexiglass shatters as a round punches through the navigator's compartment. Russo cries out, not in pain, but in shock, as shards of plastic spray across his maps. Hold it, Kowalski mutters, a prayer to himself. The bridge fills his entire field of vision. Bombs away. He toggles the release. You feel the plane leap upwards, suddenly lighter as 1,000 pounds of high explosive fall away. The crew holds its collective breath for 3 agonizing seconds. Then, behind them, the world turns orange and black. A colossal concussion slams into the tail of the B-17, throwing it sideways. The tail gunner, Sergeant Peterman, shouts with glee. Direct hit. The son of a bitch is gone. It's in the water. 1 down. 6 to go. There is no time for celebration. The canyon twists, and the next target, a stone arch road bridge, is less than a mile ahead. More gun emplacements, alerted by the attack on the first, are waiting. This time, the flak is thicker, a dense, lethal lattice. Thump. 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 A string of shells walks its way up the fuselage. Inside, the noise is deafening, like a giant hammering on the outside of a tin can. The radio operator, Sergeant Harris, yelps as a round smashes through his compartment, obliterating his radio set and embedding itself in the bulkhead an inch from his head. He stares at the twisted metal, his face ashen. The waist gunners are in a duel of their own, firing non-stop at muzzle flashes on the canyon slopes. Got one of them yells, as a German machine gun nest disappears in a hail of .50 caliber rounds. But for every one they suppress, 2 more open up. The B-17 is a magnificent target, a huge, silver canvas for the Germans to paint with fire. Riley keeps the plane steady on its deadly course. He isn't just piloting an aircraft, he is conducting an orchestra of violence, every gun and every crewman a vital instrument. He feels a strange sense of detachment, a clarity that borders on the divine. The fear is gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. The mockery of the briefing room feels a world away. This wasn't a suicide run. It was a symphony. A brutal, terrifying, magnificent symphony. And they were only just beginning the second movement. The next 2 bridges fall in quick succession, Kowalski's aim unerring. 3. 4. But the plane is taking a terrible beating. Hydraulic fluid begins to mist in the cockpit. The number 3 engine is sputtering, trailing a thin line of black smoke. Pilot from navigator. Russo's voice is strained. The big one is next. The double-span bridge at San Rocco. Intel says it's the most heavily defended point in the valley. As they round the next bend, they see it. It's not just a bridge, it's a fortress. Concrete pillboxes are built into the cliffsides. At least 4 batteries of 37mm guns are positioned for a perfect crossfire. And in the center of the span, a flak tower commands the entire approach. It is a maw of interlocking fire, an anvil upon which they are about to be hammered. The gauntlet was just the beginning. This is the heart of the beast. The San Rocco Bridge complex rises before them like a vision from hell. The air, already thick with smoke and cordite, becomes a solid mass of flying metal. The storm of 20mm flak is now joined by the heavier, slower, and far more lethal pom-pom of 37mm cannons. Each explosion is a vicious, physical blow, a punch of compressed air that rattles the teeth and shakes the aircraft to its very rivets. They're everywhere. The ball turret gunner, a kid from Ohio named Sorelli, screams over the intercom. His voice is high with a mixture of terror and awe. From his spinning sphere beneath the plane, he has a 360-degree view of the chaos. He swivels his twin guns, hosing down one emplacement, then another, a tiny, fragile David against a dozen Goliaths. Riley grits his teeth, his arms aching from the strain of holding the damaged bomber steady. The controls feel sloppy, unresponsive. The mist of hydraulic fluid is thicker now, its acrid smell filling the cockpit. A 37mm shell explodes just off the left wing. The concussion is titanic. It lifts the wing with incredible force, throwing the B-17 into a terrifyingly steep bank. For a split second, they are flying sideways, the canyon wall filling the entire right side view. "I've got it! I've got it!" Miller yells, throwing his entire body into the co-pilot's yoke, fighting alongside Riley to level the plane. Alarms blare. The number 2 engine, on the now damaged left wing, sputters, catches, and then dies completely, its propeller windmilling uselessly. "We've lost number 2. Miller shouts over the din. Number 3 is overheating. They are flying on 3 engines, one of which is failing, into the teeth of the most concentrated anti-aircraft fire they have ever seen. Retreat is impossible. There is no room to turn, no altitude to gain. The only way out is forward. "Kowalski. Talk to me." Riley barks into the mic. "Almost there, skipper. Give me 5 more seconds of straight flight." "Just 5 seconds," the bombardier replies, his voice tight with concentration. The flak tower on the bridge is firing directly at them, a hose of red tracers hosing down the nose of the plane. The plexiglass around Kowalski shatters and blows inward, and a sudden, violent wind tears at his face and clothes. He ignores it, his eye glued to the target. Riley gives the bomber full right rudder to counteract the drag from the dead engine. The plane crabs through the air, fighting to stay on course. It feels like wrestling an enraged animal. 3 seconds. The hammering on the fuselage is constant now, a hellish drum beat. 2 seconds. A round punches through the floor by Riley's feet, leaving a ragged hole. 1 second. Bombs away. Kowalski screams. "Get us out of here." Riley doesn't need to be told. He pushes the throttles of the remaining 3 engines to the firewall. The overloaded right cyclones scream in protest. As the final 4 500-pound bombs fall, St. Elmo's fire shudders and lurches upward. The explosion is the biggest yet. It is not just one blast, but a series of them, as their bombs seem to set off secondary explosions on the bridge itself, likely from a munitions-laden train caught in the open. The entire structure, steel and stone, lifts into the air in a cloud of fire, smoke, and debris. It collapses into the gorge in a final, apocalyptic roar. A wave of pure, savage elation washes through the crew. They've done the impossible. But they are still deep inside the canyon. 2 smaller bridges remain. They are damaged, bleeding, and their enemies are far from finished. The plane limps onward, leaving the wreckage of San Rocco behind. The flak lessens slightly, but it's still dangerously accurate. The gunners, running low on ammunition, switch to short, controlled bursts, aiming for specific targets. They are no longer a roaring gunship, but a wounded beast, snapping and biting as it drags itself toward safety. Kowalski, his face cut and bleeding from the shattered plexiglass, guides the last two bomb releases with grim precision. The sixth bridge vanishes. Then the seventh. The mission is complete. 7 bridges destroyed. The German supply line is severed. But as the last bridge falls behind them, a new and more terrifying enemy appears, the canyon wall. At the end of the valley, the terrain rises steeply. To escape, they need to climb fast. Riley pulls back on the yoke, trying to coax the crippled bomber upward. The 3 laboring engines strain, their roar changing to a desperate, high-pitched whine. The plane responds sluggishly, clawing for every foot of altitude. The airspeed indicator bleeds away. 180 miles per hour. 170, 160. The stall horn begins to blare, a single, horrifying, continuous note that signifies impending doom. They are too heavy, too damaged, and have too little power. The rock wall at the end of the valley looms larger, a granite tombstone waiting for them. The B-17 is about to fall out of the sky. The stall horn is the sound of death. It is a mechanical shriek that signifies the wings are no longer creating enough lift to support the aircraft's weight. For the crew of St. Elmo's Fire, trapped in a narrow canyon with a wall of rock filling their windscreen, it is the sound of their grave being dug. The B-17 shudders, on the verge of losing its grip on the air. Jettison everything. Riley roars. Guns, ammo, flak vests, anything that's not bolted down. Now. The order galvanizes the crew. The waist gunners, without hesitation, unlatch their heavy M2 Brownings and heave them out into the slipstream. Boxes of remaining ammunition follow. Flak jackets, toolkits, emergency rations, anything with weight is hurled from the plane. In the tail, Peterman does the same. Every pound shed is another inch of altitude gained. Slowly, agonizingly, the sacrifice works. The stall horn sputters and falls silent. The nose, which had begun to dip, holds steady. The airspeed creeps back up to 165, then 170. They are still flying. Riley keeps the nose pointed up, coaxing every last ounce of performance from the battered engines. They clear the ridge at the end of the valley with less than 50 feet to spare. The belly of the bomber scrapes through the tops of the pine trees, sending a shower of green needles into the air behind them. Then, they are out. Out of the canyon, into the open, sunlit sky. Silence descends on the intercom. For a full 10 seconds, the only sounds are the uneven drone of the 3 engines and the wind whistling through 100 new holes in the fuselage. The crew is breathless, suspended between the terror of the last 15 minutes and the uncertainty of what lies ahead. Pops Grabowski is the first to speak, his voice raspy. Pilot from top turret. Skipper. I think we're alive. A wave of shaky laughter, more sob than humor, ripples through the crew. They've survived the gauntlet. But the war for St. Elmo's Fire is far from over. A quick damage assessment paints a grim picture. The number 2 engine is gone. Number 3 is still overheating, threatening to seize or catch fire at any moment. The hydraulic system is shot, meaning they will have no flaps and no brakes for landing. The radio is destroyed. They are alone, crippled, and still hundreds of miles from Foggia, with the Adriatic and a host of enemy territories to cross. Russo, his maps thankfully intact, lays out a new course, one that avoids known flak concentrations but adds precious minutes to their flight time. Every minute is a gamble against their dwindling fuel and failing engines. The crew now works with a new, desperate purpose. Sorelli and the waist gunners, their guns gone, become medics. 2 men have been hit by shrapnel. The radio operator, Harris, has a nasty gash on his arm, and one of the waist gunners took a piece of metal in his leg. They are patched up with sulfa powder and bandages, the wound serious but not life-threatening. Every man is accounted for. Every man is alive. The flight home is a long, tense vigil. Every sputter from the number 3 engine makes 10 hearts leap. They watch the fuel gauges dip toward empty. Riley and Miller fly with a light, delicate touch, nursing the bomber, conserving every drop of fuel, treating her not as a machine but as a dying patient. As they cross the coast and leave Italy behind, the mood begins to shift. Below them is the endless, forgiving blue of the Adriatic. They are out of immediate danger. An hour later, a smudge appears on the horizon. Home. As they get closer, Russo confirms it, the Foggia airfield. They are going to make it? Riley keys the intercom one last time. All right, boys. We're not out of the woods yet. We have no brakes and no flaps. This landing is going to be rough. Brace yourselves. They can't contact the tower, but the ground crew see them coming. They see the dead, feathered prop on the number 2 engine. They see the smoke trailing from number 3. They see the fuselage, which looks more like a piece of Swiss cheese than the skin of an aircraft. Ambulances and fire trucks race to the side of the runway, their red lights flashing. Riley lines up the approach. Without flaps, their landing speed is dangerously high. He brings the plane in low and fast. Miller is by his side, ready to help on the rudder to keep them straight. Here we go, Riley mutters. The wheels touch the runway with a hard jolt, skipping once before settling. The bomber is hurtling down the steel planking at over 140 miles per hour with no way to stop. Riley uses the rudders, skidding the plane from side to bleed off speed. Metal groans in protest. The tires scream. They careen past the halfway point of the runway, the end rushing toward them. Finally, with a final, violent skid that almost takes them into the mud, St. Elmo's fire slows to a halt. Silence. The 2 remaining engines are shut down. The quiet is absolute. For a moment, the 10 men inside do not move. They sit in the battered, silent hulk, listening to the sound of their own breathing, the ticking of cooling metal, and the distant cry of approaching sirens. The hatch opens. One by one, they climb down onto the solid ground, leaning on each other. They are covered in sweat, grease, and in some cases, blood. They are utterly exhausted. A crowd gathers, ground crew and pilots from other squadrons, the same men who had mocked them that morning. They stare, mouths agape, not at the crew, but at the airplane. St. Elmo's fire is a ruin. Its wings are shredded, the tail looks like it was chewed by a giant, and the fuselage is peppered with over 200 documented flak and bullet holes. It is a miracle that it flew. It is a greater miracle that it brought them all home. Colonel Davies pushes through the crowd, his face a mask of disbelief. He looks at the plane, then at the 10 men standing before him, all upright, all alive. He walks up to Riley, whose face is a grim smear of oil and fatigue. He doesn't say a word. He simply reaches out, grabs Riley's hand, and shakes it. The ridicule is gone, replaced by a profound, silent awe. The flying coffin had flown through the gates of hell and returned, not with ghosts, but with heroes.